Briefing by Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, Moscow, July 24, 2024. The fate of Russian citizens on the crew of the capsized boat Argos, Georgia. I would like to begin with an emergency about which we have received many questions. The media have reported that the fishing vessel FV Argos, Georgia with an international crew, reportedly including Russians, sank off the Falkland Islands. According to preliminary information, the Russian crew members have not been hurt. We will keep you informed. ****The latest news about the fishing boat Argos, Georgia, which sank in the South Atlantic, says, citing the Falklands Coast Guard and the shipowner, that there were 8 Russians on board. 4 of them are alive, 3 are dead and 1 is missing. Sergei Lavrov's participation in the ASEAN, EAS, and ARF. We have reported during the previous briefing that on July 26-27 Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be in Vientiane for the regular ministerial meetings of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, held in different formats, including Russia-ASEAN, the East Asia Summit, EAS, and the ASEAN Regional Forum, ARF. During these meetings, we will present our views on the regional situation, in particular, the growth of the conflict potential in Asia-Pacific due to the Western policy of militarizing the region, NATO military potential build-up, and the expansion of the network of bloc mechanisms. We will continue to advocate the idea of creating a just and equal world order where ASEAN is a natural partner for the SCO and the EAEU. These 3 organizations are working in a common system of coordinates for positive cooperation and stronger interaction in various areas. We hope to use the Russia-ASEAN ministerial meetings for holding a substantive dialogue on the full scope of cooperation with the association in politics, security, trade, the economy, social and cultural spheres. We will use ASEAN support to promote practical initiatives on international information security, which is among Russia's priorities on this platform. The agenda of Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's visit to Vientiane includes many bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the ASEAN events. We will keep you updated. The Ukraine crisis. On July 27, the Donetsk People's Republic will mark a tragic date, Day of Remembrance for Child Victims of the War, established on July 11, 2022 by an executive order of the head of the Republic. In 2014, the Kiev regime declared a real war to exterminate civilians in the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. Since then, over 300 children were killed, and about 1,000 more wounded. These statistics are horrendous. Unfortunately, the number of underage children, killed by Kiev-controlled military formations, continues to increase in Donbass and elsewhere. On this day, we also remember innocent victims from the Belgorod, Kursk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson regions, the Republic of Crimea and Sevastopol, including those killed or wounded by militants of the Kiev regime. On June 23, 2024, militants from the Armed Forces of Ukraine launched ATACMS missiles against the Uchkoyevka municipal beach in Sevastopol. Many holidaymakers with children were staying there on that Sunday. In all, there were 153 civilian casualties, including 27 children. The attack killed 4 people, including 2 children aged 2 and 9 years. On June 28, 2024, a Ukrainian drone deliberately hit a residential building in the village of Gorodishch in the Kursk region and killed an entire family of 5, including 2 little children. On July 5, 2024, the Armed Forces of Ukraine launched drones against residential areas in Primorsko-Akhtarsk in the Krasnodar territory, killing a 6-year-old girl and wounding a 7-year-old boy. On July 11, 2024, the Armed Forces of Ukraine conducted a barbaric attack against children at a playground in the village of Shebekino in the Belgorod region. A drone deliberately dropped an explosive device on them. 5 minors were wounded, and 1 of them later died in a hospital. These recent crimes highlight the inhuman nature of the terrorist Kiev regime, which is fighting defenseless children without a twinge of conscience. Apart from direct perpetrators and those who issued criminal orders, countries of the collective West that are providing Ukraine with lethal weapons and demanding that the Kiev regime fight until the last Ukrainian are also involved in crimes against children. The demise of Russian and Ukrainian children weighs heavily on their conscience. This is confirmed by a July 8, 2024 attack involving a Norwegian-made NASAMS guided surface-to-air missile system against the Okamat Hospital for Children in Kiev. Despite cynical manipulations and video graphic compilations by Ukraine's Center of Information and Psychological Operations, it is quite easy to distinguish between a Russian-made Kh-101 missile and a Western-made AIM-120 missile. On July 17, a Russian representative at the talks on military security and arms control in Vienna described these differences in great detail at the OSCE Forum for Security Cooperation No. 1084. The text and a detailed presentation are posted on the Foreign Ministry's website. Unfortunately, it is impossible to bring back the deceased children and to provide closure for their parents and relatives. However, it is necessary to expose their murderers, who will be severely punished. Russian investigative agencies will take care of this. There cannot be, nor will there be, any statute of limitations for these barbaric crimes. One of the aims of the special military operation is demilitarization, that is, depriving the neo-Nazi regime of any chance to deliver strikes at peaceful cities, strikes that kill or injure civilians, including underage children. This objective will be reached for the sake of children's future. We do not divide children along ethnic lines. Based on evidence provided by the Investigative Committee of Russia, Russian courts continue passing sentences on Ukrainian nationalists who have committed grave crimes against civilians. Igor Filin, a militant from the neo-Nazi organization known as Azov, has been sentenced to 26 years in prison for having obeyed the criminal order to kill 2 civilians in Mariupol in April 2022. The Supreme Court of the Donetsk People's Republic sentenced Sergei Averyanov, an AFU militant, to 20 years imprisonment in absentia. In February 2022, he ordered his subordinates to fire mortars at the village of Tryachizbyunka. An international arrest warrant has been issued for him. The same sentence, 20 years, has been passed in absentia on Ukraine's Andranik Gasparyan, who ordered his artillery brigade to fire at civilian facilities in Stakhanov, Lugansk People's Republic, in July 2020. An international arrest warrant has been issued for him. The Supreme Court of the Donetsk People's Republic has sentenced Ukrainian Nazis Sergei Nebeshchuk and Nikolai Drandolush to 20 years imprisonment for having obeyed the criminal order to fire at a residential house from their tank in Mariupol in March 2022. We have to refer to them as people, but they have all the basic attributes of non-humans. Just think of it, we are living in the 21st century. The 20th century saw the approval of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The principles of warfare have been outlined. There are outlines of humanitarian law that protects civilians, including during hostilities. But they run a tank into a settlement and it starts firing at a house. Do they persist in calling residents in those cities their residents and their citizens, and the cities themselves and their infrastructure their territories? Let me remind you that we are speaking about Mariupol, which is no longer a Ukrainian city, nor is it associated in any way with the state of Ukraine. But Bankovaya Street is still making affirmative statements to this effect. Now let's talk about what is happening in the lives of those people who have made their conscious and legitimate, albeit hard-won choice, because they had to survive under the relentless shelling by the Ukrainian regular forces and the nationalist battalions of the Kiev regime. Let's talk about Russia's new regions. Despite the Kiev neo-Nazis tenaciously attacking those regions of Russia, large-scale development is in full swing in the DPR and LPR, and in the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. The Russian builders' ambition is to bring the basic socio-economic development indicators in those regions up to the national average by the end of the decade. To date, nearly every region in Russia has committed to support certain areas in the new regions. According to the latest data, their assistance has already enabled restoration works on a total of 3,516 different facilities destroyed by the Bandera regime. As many as 1,300 educational institutions have been repaired, including more than 400 schools and kindergartens. This means the new regions will be absolutely prepared for the new school year. Serious emphasis has been placed on building and improving roads this year. Work is underway to implement one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in Russia, the construction of an over 1,400 kilometers long ring road around the Sea of Azov. Since the beginning of this year, Russian specialists have laid more than 550 kilometers of the bottom layer of asphalt for these projects ahead of schedule, with this year's target at 640 kilometers. About 70% of roads are ready for use in Indiana, the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. Russia continues to bring peace and prosperity to every community liberated from the misanthropic gang of terrorists sitting in Kiev. You can certainly see what is happening on the Ukrainian side every day. Any proposals for joint steps towards a peaceful resolution of this terrible situation are being blocked. In particular, I am referring to the efforts of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who came under a barrage of criticism, or should I say under the EU and NATO bombing, for taking steps to promote a peaceful settlement and peacekeeping activity. On July 17, the European Parliament adopted a resolution condemning the Hungarian Prime Minister's visits to Moscow and Beijing. The document says that such behavior should have serious consequences for Hungary. At the same time, even before the resolution was passed, the European Commission announced plans to boycott the European Council meetings held in Hungary, and some of the members demanded stripping the country of its right to vote in the European Union. The very idea that peace talks were possible seems to have been enough to make European officials go ballistic. These same officials continue to accuse Russia of allegedly not wanting peace and stepping up aggressive rhetoric. The only explanation for this reaction on the part of the European bureaucracy is that they need this war literally like air, that they cannot live without it. To get what they want, they are ready to put pressure even on their own partners. Following the recent NATO summit, Vladimir Zelensky with his trademark reaching out hand was seen at the European Political Community Summit held in Woodstock, UK, on July 18. As expected, the theme of the meeting boiled down to the support for the Kiev regime. It is the only agenda that evokes least contradictions between the UK and the EU. However, the real outcome of that feudal get-together is rather scarce for Ukraine. With a view to somehow justify his visit, Zelensky brought to Kiev two new, earlier, I would have said useless scraps of paper, Zelensky's scraps of paper, that's how such papers should essentially be called, security agreements with the Czech Republic and Slovenia. These assurances of security will not bring back and will not stop the death of the Ukrainian people, whom Zelensky destroys and sacrifices to please his Western masters. The issue is not about the paper and the agreements that Zelensky signs, but about the fact that he is obsessed with keeping himself in power and willing to do anything for the sake of it. Noteworthy are the revelations of the newly appointed ambassador of Ukraine to the United Kingdom. After a lot of hardship, the newly minted ambassador, former head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Valery Zaluzhny, has arrived to London. He started fulfilling his duties with a presentation at the Royal United Services Institute. In front of a British audience, the former Ukrainian military leader, maybe he still is, who knows, was quite candid, saying that thanks to the lives of ordinary Ukrainians they were able to win a chance for themselves, as the ex-chief commander vividly described the first days of the special military operation. Why such modesty? Basically, Vladimir Zelensky drew a chance, a lucky ticket only thanks to the lives of ordinary Ukrainians, as Valery Zaluzhny said. He went on to say that it was time for Europeans to give up certain freedoms for the sake of survival. This is a bold theory, considering that contrary to the theory of survival, it was Western Europeans who brought freedoms to Ukraine, of which both were extremely proud. Whose survival was Zaluzhny talking about? After all, no one threatens Europeans, and Ukrainians will stop dying as soon as their own authorities, as well as Washington, London, and the collective Brussels stop sending them to meet storms. From Zaluzhny's further remarks, it becomes apparent that all this is being done for the survival of the Kiev gang, this is their priority. And obviously, it is indicative that the pocket dictator rushed to call Donald Trump after the assassination attempt. This also shows the Kiev regime's fidelity to principle and non-opportunistic nature. As they say, nothing personal, just the fear of losing their permanent position in the Ukrainian power. There are no moral, ethical, or deterrent reasons, they are ready to do anything to keep their grip on power. In return for restricting the rights of Western citizens, Valery Zaluzny has offered Ukraine's partners, who have the technology and resources but no applied and practical field to test them, to use Ukraine as the testing ground. I remember how it began. Vladimir Zelensky urged Western and also other countries that have new weapons to test them on Ukrainians, as it turned out. Such statements were made a year ago. Since then, many new Western weapons have been tested on Ukrainians. It appears that the potential for experiments has not been exhausted, because the Kiev thugs intend to continue to sacrifice Ukrainian citizens to their mercenary interests. In his situation, Ukrainians will continue to go through many other horrors created and perpetrated by the Kiev regime for the sole purpose of prolonging the agony of Zelensky and his gang. I am referring to the situation in Ukraine, but there are also the Western handers who have been robbing Ukraine jointly with Zelensky and for years before him, lining their pockets and inventing various schemes to withdraw capital moving through Ukraine. I am referring to the Western leaders who the Kiev regime is expected to protect now. The matter concerns billions or even tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, in particular, in the form of the uncontrollable supply of weapons. These facts are fresh proof of the topical essence of the special military operation launched for denazifying and demilitarizing Ukraine and eliminating the threats coming from its territory. All these goals will be achieved without fail. Moldova update. The Moldovan authorities, or more precisely the regime of Maia Sandu, continues trying in vain, as it turns out, to whip up anti-Russia hysteria in the hope of remaining afloat. On July 15, 2024, President Sandu said that Russia's goal is to bring to power in Moldova those who are selling their country. Moldovans themselves regard such statements ironically. Local political analysts point out that these statements sound ridiculous when uttered by politicians who are consistently pursuing the line for the destruction of Moldovan sovereignty and independence, statehood and, ultimately, the Moldovan language. These statements sound ridiculous because they are made by Moldovan politicians and Sandu's ruling team who are turning their country into an EU colony. Facts are facts. The process of surrendering Moldova's strategic resources to external control is ongoing. On July 17, 2024, Foreign Minister of Moldova Mihai Popescu welcomed the good news of Romania's interest in buying Red Nord, a state distributor of energy in the north of Moldova. On July 11, 2024, the Moldovan Parliament adopted in the first reading amendments to the law on management and privatization of public property. Experts pointed out that over 50 major enterprises, including in the field of transport infrastructure, had been removed from the initial list of companies to be exempt from privatization. It is feared, with good reason, that they could be sold for a pittance to Romanian operators. The demographic situation in Moldova has become disastrous because of the pro-Western regime. According to the initial results of a recent census, the population of some regions has decreased by 25–30%. Expert estimates say that the country's population has decreased by over 200,000 during Sandu's rule, and the birth rate is the lowest in the past 2 centuries. The socio-economic situation continues to deteriorate. According to official data, industrial production slumped by 5.2% in May 2024 year-on-year. Foreign trade is stagnating. In January to May, Moldova's exports decreased by 13.5% and imports by 2.3% compared to the first 5 months of 2023. The Ukrainization of Moldova's policy is proceeding apace. The government of Maia Sandu is actively using the experience of Kiev's struggle against dissent. Last week, an anonymous analog of the far-right Ukrainian website Miratvorets was established in Moldova. It is publishing the personal data of Moldovan politicians and public figures who are accused of activities damaging the national interests of the Republic of Moldova. I would like to say that this should be the responsibility of law enforcement bodies, which have their own sites, in particular, the Interior Ministry, the Prosecutor's Office, investigative authorities and, possibly, courts. Creating and running such sites by active citizens amounts to the abuse of power, at the very least. In reality, this is extremism, and the national authorities, in this case the government of Moldova, are pandering to it. They are not simply legitimizing abuse of power but extremism. The media have reported that a draft project for the first multimodal logistics terminal on the border with Romania was presented in Chișinău on July 19, 2024. According to an official press release, the terminal should increase the effectiveness of trade and economic transactions with neighboring countries. However, Moldovan experts believe that the logistics hub, estimated at €30 million, will most likely be used to transport cargo, including military cargo, from Romania to Ukraine. This view is shared by the former Prime Minister and the current presidential candidate, Ion Cicu, who said that Moldova would be turned into a transshipment point for the delivery of Western weapons to Ukraine. When this project is implemented, Moldovan citizens, who still believe Sandu, will see that they have been cruelly deceived. On July 22, 2024, speaking on television, the ambassador of Ukraine to Moldova, Mark Shevchenko, threatened Moldovan citizens supporting the local opposition. In his opinion, their voice is tantamount to buying a ticket to the war. Is the ambassador of Ukraine saying this? Quite possibly, he has forgotten that he is sending his own citizens to the war as stowaways, by distributing these tickets free of charge at military enlistment offices and by forcing people to take part in this tour without a return ticket. Official Chișinău does not miss an opportunity to baselessly accuse Russia of interfering in Moldova's domestic political processes. Moldovan authorities have failed to respond to this outrageous attack by the Ukrainian ambassador. The people of Moldova realize that the republic's hybrid Romanization and Ukrainization, promoted by the authorities under European integration slogans, have pernicious consequences for their country. Opinion polls unequivocally confirm public discontent with the unpopular policy of Maia Sandu's regime. A recent survey, conducted by the Intellect Group agency, only 40% of Moldovan citizens agree with the idea of including a provision on Moldova's European track into the constitution. At the same time, 80% suggest preserving traditional family values. Despite active official anti-Russia propaganda, most Moldovans do not see Russia as a threat and suggest expanding bilateral relations. We completely share this mood. The people of Moldova have always been and still are our friends. I believe that they are well aware of this. Reprisals against Moldovan citizens who support ties with Russia and call for expanded bilateral relations in all spheres have already broken all world records in terms of their dynamics in Moldova under the regime of Maia Sandu. The Beijing Declaration on Ending Division and Strengthening Palestinian National Unity. We welcome the agreements on ending Palestinian division reached between representatives of 14 Palestinian factions at a meeting organized with China's assistance in Beijing on July 23, 2024. Before that, Russia hosted several intra-Palestinian consultations. The latest round, held in Moscow on February 29 and March 1, 2024, was attended by all the leading Palestinian forces, including Fatah and Hamas. The statement adopted following that meeting set out a number of fundamental consensus solutions. In particular, it reaffirmed the sides' desire to consolidate their positions on the political platform of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and to create a sovereign Palestinian state in the West Bank of the River Jordan and the Gaza Strip. We note with satisfaction that the Beijing Declaration is fully in line with the keynotes that were set on paper in Moscow. We hope that these agreements will be implemented. It is our consistent belief that Palestinian unity and the administrative and political integrity of the Palestinian territories within the 1967 borders are the indispensable prerequisite for consistent peace talks between Palestine and Israel. We reaffirm our readiness to continue energetically support Palestinians on this track, including in close coordination with our Chinese colleagues and regional partners. Pentagon's updated Arctic strategy. We have read the updated Arctic strategy, which has been recently published by the U.S. Department of Defense. The document is obviously intended to escalate military and political tension in that region, as if it is not enough for Washington what it has already done. Adopted soon after the Washington NATO summit, the Pentagon's updated Arctic strategy shows that use of force scenarios dominate the U.S. approaches to the Arctic for securing its interests. That area, which until recently was the territory of peaceful and constructive cooperation. This cooperation was effective and mutually beneficial. Meanwhile, The United States regards deeper interaction with its North Atlantic allies and increasing their capabilities above the Arctic Circle as a priority instrument for ensuring security and stability in the polar latitudes. The blatant interference by the U.S. Defense Department, as set forth in the strategy, in cooperation between other countries in the Arctic, specifically between Russia and China, which stems from Washington's recent ideological tenets, deserves special attention. It should be noted that unlike non-Arctic NATO members, including Great Britain and Germany, China is following the policy of military restraint in high latitudes, abstaining from bringing additional tension to the region. However, the U.S. strategy fails to take this into account. We would like to remind everyone that in itself, Russian-Chinese cooperation is not aimed against any third countries in contrast to the goals outlined in the American military strategy, which implies drawing U.S. allies in efforts to counter Russia and China. 30th Anniversary of the Association of Caribbean States. The convention establishing the Association of Caribbean States, ACS, was signed exactly 30 years ago, on July 24, 1994, in Cartagena, Colombia. In addition to the 13 island states of the Caribbean Basin, the ACS includes 7 Central American countries, as well as Mexico and countries with access to the northern coast of South America, for a total of 25 member countries. For Russia, the Association of Caribbean States is an important sub-regional mechanism that contributes to the development of dialogue in the Western Hemisphere, promotes inter-American understanding and cooperation, and the consolidation of peace diplomacy in the Caribbean countries which have freed themselves from the colonial dependence. For a quarter of a century, Russia has been consistently developing constructive cooperation with the Association of Caribbean States, having been a permanent observer in the organization since 1997. The Foreign Ministry and the General Secretariat of the Association are working on a memorandum on their cooperation. We believe that engaging in joint efforts to counter neo-colonial practices could be one of the priority domains in our relations. We can see that our Caribbean partners are committed to continuing the dialogue and enhancing their multifaceted cooperation with Russia, including in trade, economics, and on humanitarian affairs, while also placing a special emphasis on natural disaster prevention and relief, which has special importance for the Caribbeans and Central America. As for our citizens, they are well aware of the Caribbean hospitality. The region enjoys great popularity with Russian tourists, who can benefit from visa-free travel arrangements to make their travel-related dreams come true. We are open to signing documents of this kind with all members of the Association of Caribbean States. 10th BRICS Youth Summit. The BRICS Youth Summit, a traditional event held for the 10th time, opened in Ulyanovsk on July 22 and will last until July 26. The summit is held in accordance with the action plan of the Russian BRICS chairmanship and will be the key event on our agenda in line with Russia's main position, which is to strengthen multilateralism for equitable global growth and security. The event will serve to foster youth cooperation among the participating countries, to share experiences and to propose initiatives for joint implementation. More than 200 young people and 20 experts from the BRICS countries are expected to speak on 5 different subjects, including education, science and training, youth entrepreneurship, science, technology and innovation, youth civil society service and volunteering, as well as sport and healthy lifestyle. Each issue was developed by a separate country. Russia, in particular, addressed education and science. The BRICS Youth Media Platform, BRICS Radio, and the BRICS Universe Project, which is a series of exhibitions, will be presented during the summit. The exhibits include 40 images by photographers from the participating countries and works by cosmonauts Sergei Kudzverchkov and Ivan Vanur, who captured views of the Earth from the International Space Station. The project will last through October and will cover Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, Mumbai, India, Cape Town, South Africa, and Kazan, Russia. On July 25, BRICS ministers and heads of youth affairs agencies will meet to discuss proposals for lining up youth cooperation and the World Youth Festival's legacy. The 80th anniversary of liberation of Brest from Nazi invaders. July 28 will mark the 80th anniversary of liberating Hero City Brest from Nazi invaders, which completed the cleansing of Belarusia from the Brown Plague. In the first half of July 1944, as a result of the successful advance of the Soviet troops across Belarus, proper conditions were created for encircling the enemy's Brest grouping. Nazis made thorough preparations for the battles for Brest. They built entrenchments with a large number of pillboxes and minefields. Their defense system included the Brest fortress as well. Hitler issued an order prohibiting retreat from these positions. Despite this, the Soviet troops liberated Brest in less than 2 days. I was in Brest not long ago. It has a lot to offer to anyone who wants to know the history of our countries, our forefathers, and the Union State and pass it on to future generations. I was struck by what I heard form a museum guide. Brest Fortress and the battle that started the Great Patriotic War are known internationally. Details transpired many years later thanks to the efforts of opinion writers, journalists, and researchers, domestic and otherwise. However, Brest Fortress survived and was the battlefield twice. Once, when the Nazis attacked our country, and then when they were retreating. So, the Brest Fortress battle should be glorified in history twice, as well. The liberation of Brest contributed to the success of the Lublin-Brest offensive, which swept the enemy away from Soviet Belarus. The Red Army advanced westward up to 260 kilometers deep and, having seized bridgeheads on the Vistula River, created favorable conditions for the subsequent defeat of the enemy in the direction of Warsaw and complete liberation of Poland. The victory at Brest had a great symbolic, moral, and political meaning. 47 units and formations of the First Belarusian Front, which distinguished themselves for selfless valor in the battles, were awarded the honorary name of Brest. A 20 artillery volley salute from 224 guns was fired in Moscow on the occasion of victory. In 1971, a memorial complex was built in Brest featuring giant sculptures Courage and Thirst, a pantheon of glory, ceremonial square, mothballed ruins, restored barracks of the Brest Fortress, and a museum. The immortal feat of the heroes who defended the Brest Fortress, who were the first to bear the brunt of the Nazi invasion and became another example of courage and fortitude for all Soviet people, will remain forever seared in our memory. In this connection, it is symbolic that Brest was the final point in more than 3 years of Nazi occupation of Belarus. As we noted earlier in our congratulations on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of liberation of Minsk on July 3, which is marked in Belarus as Independence Day of the Republic, the spiritual unity of our fraternal peoples, faith in the power of truth and our own strength, as well as a reverent attitude to the preservation of historical memory, allow us today to successfully overcome any trials and to give a firm rebuff to the heirs of Napoleon and Hitler who are trying to rear their heads. Allow me to extend heartfelt congratulations to the fraternal Belarusian people on this remarkable date. I wish you happiness, well-being and peaceful skies. You have my deepest respect for preserving our common memory. World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. July 30th is the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, established by the UN General Assembly resolution on December 18, 2013. To raise awareness of trafficking in persons and the situation of the victims of this crime and for the promotion and protection of their rights. The relevance of this concept, as well as of the need to build up international cooperation in this area, is beyond doubt. We are confident that significant results in the fight against this global scourge can only be achieved with strong political will, and through combined efforts of governments, businesses, and civil society. We stand for the preservation of the United Nations' leading role in bringing together national and international agencies involved in combating human trafficking. In this regard, we place great emphasis on implementing the Global Plan of Action to Combat Trafficking in Persons adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2010. We hope that these initiatives will contribute to a wider awareness of this problem in the world and a qualitative improvement in the interaction of all the interested parties in the fight against this criminal business. With a view to the practical implementation of the Global Plan of Action, Russia participates in the work of the Group of Friends United in the Fight Against Trafficking in Persons, established at the initiative of Belarus. Also, Russia has long been one of the co-sponsors of the resolution on improving the coordination of efforts against trafficking in persons, as submitted by our Belarusian partners to the UN General Assembly. Russia is a party to the fundamental international legal documents on human trafficking. We think it essential to improve and enhance international efforts to combat human trafficking and expand interstate cooperation in this area. At the same time, we are interested in a wide-ranging and comprehensive consideration of this issue and the promotion of a balanced approach covering human trafficking in all its aspects. In the same context, I cannot fail to mention the situation in Ukraine, where human trafficking crimes have become widespread and have reached a truly horrifying scale, which is simply impossible not to notice. The Kiev regime blatantly lies about thousands of Ukrainian children kidnapped by Russia, creating an international platform to rescue them, while cynically turning a blind eye to the fate of children taken to European countries, where they disappeared without a trace. According to reports, in some cases entire orphanages went missing. We have paid attention to the journalism investigation by French reporter Robert Schmidt on the involvement of the Elena Zelensky's Foundation in child trafficking in Europe. We recommend reading the final report by the State Duma Parliamentary Commission on the investigation in the criminal actions by the Kiev regime regarding minors, which was presented on June 19, 2024. The Commission worked for a year to collect information about multiple crimes against children, including killings and wounds, kidnappings and organ trafficking and other business by which the Kiev junta has been besmirched, while the Western governments cover this activity. Ukraine has gone to great lengths to make it easier for illegal transplant surgeons to operate in the country. It has streamlined procedures for the removal of organs from deceased persons who did not give their lifetime consent to donate their organs after death. However, the office of the Ukrainian president decided to deal with this matter post facto. Such permission can be obtained from an authorized person who undertakes to make arrangements for burying the donor. For example, this can be the head doctor of a hospital or head of a military unit. The right to carry out transplants has been granted not only to public, but also to private clinics. According to publicly available information, a number of units in the Ukrainian army have formed squads of potential à la carte donors, selected based on the criteria required by clients. They send these troops to the deadliest hotspots, in other words for slaughter, in order to prey on their remains. It is frightening. People are examined for physiological criteria. In other words, if a forcibly mobilized man is found healthy, the medics check his body organs against the list of organs required for transplantation. The next thing to do is to send him to the battlefield, where life turns into a horror movie. They do everything to create a situation where that man's organs can be removed. It sounds horrible, and it is difficult to believe. When you read such materials for the first time, you refuse to believe that this is happening in this reality, in the 21st century. And then you see this happening again and again. It is not a coincidence but a system. It will become clear to everyone later, as it happened with the US reckless gambits in Iraq and Kosovo, as well as the Libyan tragedy created by Western counties, which resulted in the country's dismemberment. Everyone will eventually become aware of the real reasons behind the Americans' illegal deployment in Syria, aimed at plundering it and removing its energy resources or profitably selling them to moderate terrorist groups, and the horrible scope of disaster in Afghanistan. After 20 years of the NATO forces' deployment, the world watched people chasing after and clinging to US Air Force planes to escape the problems they created in Kabul. All these facts will become public knowledge and will be added to the body of evidence of crimes committed by the Kiev regime and those who created, financed, and protected it, as well as used it for their anti-Russia purposes. In June 2024, Ukrainian media reported the exposure of a group that was involved in illegal organ harvesting, which included doctors from the Kiev Central Hospital and other Ukrainian clinics. The man in charge was a former deputy health minister of Ukraine. The criminals illegally removed body organs from disabled patients for sale abroad. Moreover, these horribly immoral activities were carried out above all to meet the demand in the West, whose patronage has turned Ukraine into a grey zone for all manner of criminals. For Zelensky's anti-national gang, Ukrainians are disposable material, the spare parts used to pay for weapons, money, loans, grants, and the like.